I started surfing in 1967. It was a lot different back then. I started on a longboard, a big, heavy 40-pounder. We had to build these carts with 2x4s and wagon wheels to carry our boards on our bicycles so we could make the 4-mile ride down to the beach. At which time we'd have to paddle out with no wetsuits, and we would build these fires right on the beach down in Newport, and you'd surf for 15 minutes at a time until you started to turn blue. Your lips would be blue, your skin would be all pale and blue, and then you'd come in and shiver around the campfire so you're warm, then you go do it all over again. I started making boards because the shortboard revolution hit shortly after I started surfing. And then after about a couple more months, I really wanted to get like a 6'6". Real short little egg board. And so I hit up the folks and they said, well, what do you mean? We just got you a board. We can't afford to be buying all these boards. You're on your own. At which point I was walking home from school with my best friend, and one of the neighborhood kids was out in his front yard putting a ski pole into a surfboard and just punching holes just for the sheer joy of the feeling of doing it. And we yelled, "Stop, that's sacrilege. You can't destroy a surfboard like that." And he said, "Yes, I can." Goosh, as he punched another hole. We said, "Wait, we'll buy it." How much? So we ended up buying it for $3, and we had no clue as to what we were doing. We shaped it with a little grinding disc on a home Black & Decker drill, and it came out all lumpy, and we didn't know what we were doing with the glassing, but we did a sort of fancy psychedelic paint job, and we thought it was the bomb, but it turned out to not work that great, so we got rid of it, and then we each decided to make our own board. We went to some of the factories over in Costa Mesa we could ride our bikes to and look in the door and see how they were doing it. And then my brother saw mine, and then he wanted one, so I made one for him. And then his friends saw his, and then they wanted them. At which point I said, hey, this is like getting to be work, so I'm going to have to charge you guys the materials and $10. My first two boards I made at a profit for $35 a piece. And that was the beginning, and it just went on from there. Every shaping room has these long side lights that are perfectly adjusted to the height of the board as it's laying on the rack. It allows me to see every little bump and scratch and concave in the surface of the board. This is a blank right here. This is how all surfboards start, is this crude surfboard form, and now I'm going to sculpt this into a piece of functional beauty. And it's kind of like a martial art that you practice over and over again. It's physical, but practice makes perfect until you get to the point where you can do it fast enough that I can actually earn some money doing this. I'll lay the blank down, lay down a hardboard template. I'll use this router to cut it out. It's got an extra long bit that reaches all the way through the blank. Then I'll grab this planer. It's got the hose on it to suck up all the shavings and deposit them directly into the vacuum canister. From there, I will use a Surfworm, which is basically a little cheese grater like bit, and that works really good at shaping the foam. So I'll shape that down a little bit by hand, and I'll grab the rough sandpaper, fine sand it with that, grab the fine screen, fine sand it with that, grab the sanding screen, and I'll have a couple of different coarsenesses. Then by sanding the foam, the little piece of wood known as a stringer tends to stick up. So first I'll grab it with the coarse plane, take the wood down, then I'll grab it with the finer plane, take the wood down until it's right up close, and I even have a couple of special little planes for getting up here inside the curve. This is a violin plane, and I can use that to get down in there, and if there's one that's really got a lot of nose rocker, then I can use this cute little plane right here, and that will get down in there and get that last little piece of wood that's sticking up. Put the dimensions on there, sign it off, and it's off to the glasser. The ideal surfboard is actually going to be a different board for each individual, because the most important thing in a custom surfboard is fit. It's just like a shoe. You wouldn't want to be walking around in somebody else's shoe. Your performance is off and your comfort level is way down. You want the ideal surfboard to be something that's comfortable for the person to ride, yet they're able to push themselves a little bit further in their performance level than they were before. The different aspects that come into play when I'm building a board for somebody are the template, which is the outline and the outside shape of the board. A wider board typically rides higher up on the water, because as you start to pick up speed, the surface area lifts you way up on there and they just fly across the top. The times when you might want a narrower board is if you're riding a bigger wave, then you don't want to skitter too high on top of the water or you'll skitter out of control. Then the longitudinal curve of the board is referred to as the rocker. Of course, you need to have kick up here, keeps you from pearl diving, or purling as it's called, and going underneath the water and creating a wipeout. So you have to have some up there, but the lower that you have, the faster the board goes. Then there's the tail rocker. The greater the tail rocker, the easier the board is to turn. The less the tail rocker, the faster the board goes. The thickness of the board. So the thickness of the board is going to, of course, determine the amount of cubic inches of foam that are in there and influences the paddleability of the board. So one of the ways that we can hide some flotation in there to aid in paddling is make it thick in the center and then dome the deck down to where you have a nice thin rail like this board. The edge of the board around the side is called the rail. And the rails can be sharp, like they are in the back, where you have a sharp edge that bites onto the water for turning and making the board go fast. It gives you better traction. And then up toward the front, we have a really soft, rounded rail that is easier to turn the board, and it allows you to negotiate a choppy ocean without catching a rail and getting pitched off the side. The light's shining through because there's a single concave that runs through the board there. As you come back here, you still have a single concave, but you also have a double concave on each side of the stringer. And what that does is creates lift in the tail to help you go faster, and it also reduces the amount of longitudinal curve or rocker so that you have a straighter rocker back here between your feet, which also helps you to go faster. My niche in the marketplace is giving people a really high quality product at an affordable price in one of the fastest turnaround times in the business. So what they get when they come to me is they really get the individual attention that they can't get from one of the larger companies. They really get the expert attention that they don't get when they just walk into a regular surf shop and the guy behind the counter is just a hot local standout surfer but doesn't necessarily know a lot about the technology of the surfboards themselves. So my customers come in and they get the latest up-to-the-date information, and they get the one-on-one relationship with the shaper that is extremely important. I still love going to the shaping room every day. It's one of the most fun things I could ever think of doing, and there's nothing better than coming to work on a good swell and finding a message on the box of somebody just telling me how great their surfboard works. That's what makes my day and makes my life worth living.